Hello and welcome to News Round, the recap of stories that made headlines during the week. I'm Ayotunde Balogun. The headlines. President Buhari extends validity of old 200 naira note for 60 days. Denomination to circulate side by side with the redesigned 1,000, 500 and 200 naira banknotes. Supreme Court adjourns hearing on the suit challenging the naira redesign policy of the federal government till February 22nd. INEC says 240 polling units across the country do not have any registered voters, which will impede the conduct of the general elections in those locations. Plus, combined death toll of the huge earthquake in Turkey and Syria rises to almost 46,000. That's News Round in review. We begin News Round with President Muhammadu Buhari's nationwide broadcast directing the Central Bank of Nigeria to retain the circulation of the old 200 naira notes side by side with the new 200, 500 and 1,000 naira notes. President Buhari told Nigerians that the decision is to reduce the difficulties being experienced with the supply of the redesigned notes. The president also took advantage of the broadcast to give assurances of his administration's commitment to a free, fair and transparent election in the forthcoming polls.
My dear compatriots,
it's a departure from the norm and an unusual national broadcast by President Muhammadu Buhari. But current happenings in the country, especially the impact of the Naira note redesign policy by the central bank, calls for his intervention, and the president begins by empathizing with citizens.
I am not unaware of the obstacles placed on the path of innocent Nigerians by unscrupulous officials in the banking industry, entrusted with the process of implementation of the new monetary policy. I am deeply pained and sincerely sympathize with you all over these unintended outcomes. To stem this tide, I have directed the CBN to deploy all legitimate resources and legal means to ensure that our citizens are adequately educated on the policy, enjoy easy access to cash withdrawal through availability of appropriate amount of currency and the ability to make deposits.
To provide some relief whilst litigation over the matter continues at the Apex Court, President Buhari gives approval for the use of the old 200 naira notes.
As an administration that respects the rule of law, I have also noted that the subject matter is before the courts of our land and some pronouncements have been made. To further ease the supply pressures, particularly to our citizens, I have given approval to the CBN that the old 200 naira banknote be released back into circulation, and that it should also be allowed to circulate as legal tender with the new 200 naira, 500 naira and 1,000 naira banknotes for 60 days from February 10th, 2023 to April 10th, 2023, when the old 200 naira note ceases to be legal tender.
Besides the issue of the new Naira note, the president also assures citizens of his commitment to credible elections.
On the 25th of February 2023, the nation will be electing a new president and National Assembly members. I am aware that this new monetary policy has also contributed immensely to the minimization of the influence of money in politics. This is a positive departure from the past and represents a bold legacy step by this administration towards laying a strong foundation for free and fair elections. I urge every citizen, therefore, to go out to vote for their candidates of choice without fear, because security shall be provided and your vote shall count.
President Buhari, who also appeals for understanding at what he terms a difficult transient phase, says these bold moves are needed to bequeath a solid legacy for the next administration. Jeffrey Uzongo, Channels Television News.
Now, the president's address on the naira redesign policy got a reaction from the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Femi Gbajabiamila, who believes his decision falls short of the order of the Supreme Court that all old notes be allowed to remain as legal tender pending the adjudication of a suit brought by state governments on the policy. In a statement, the Speaker maintains that it's disheartening that the CBN has refused to admit error and change course in the face of evidence that the policy implementation has been a failure. Meanwhile, the House of Representatives Special Ad Hoc Committee on Naira Redesign, Cashless Policy and Currency Swap has declared that the crisis is not yet over.
Hours after President Muhammadu Buhari's address to the nation on the redesigned Naira note, the House of Representatives Ad Hoc Committee on Naira Redesign Policy, Cashless Policy and Currency Swap responds with a visit to his office at their behest. At the meeting, President Buhari insists that the cashless policy and Naira swap have short and long-term benefits for the country, particularly in dealing with insecurity and corruption. According to a statement issued by the president's spokesman, Mr. Garba Shehu, the president agrees that the Apex Bank should take the recommendation of the parliamentary committee to rectify identified problems. Although the committee, in a chat with the media, lauds the president's address, they weigh the consequence of a delayed response by the CBN to the president's directive for an extension of the validity of the old 200 Naira notes.
Instructions are here. Implementations could be on the other side. Whoever fails or derails in the implementation of such directives, then the House of Representatives will use the powers around it to ensure that such directives are being implemented to the latter in the light of the law.
The committee chairman also questions what he describes as an ill-timed cashless policy capable of starving their chances at the 2023 general elections.
The law has provided for us the amount of money we need to oversee our election process. You need to pay your agents in the villages where you don't have ATM machines. If the central bank fails to make available this amount of this money we need to fund our elections, definitely every candidate, no matter what party he belongs to, will be put at disadvantage. The law has permitted me to have 70 million naira as logistics for my election funding. 1 billion for presidential candidates. I need to have this 70 million naira in hard copy.
Separately, the CBN governor appeals to Nigerians for patience.
I have met with about 15 banks this morning. Later, and we've given them directives about how they should make all the old 200 Naira notes available, effective today. And I can assure Nigerians that this will help to reduce the pains. We meet with the bankers at least once daily to get feedback and the rest of them. And I think we should just allow this policy work. The pains, temporary pains, are regrettable, but I can assure Nigerians that it will be well.
The CBN governor also promised that at the end of February, the CBN will bring into circulation between 700 and 800 billion naira, underscoring that it is impossible to inject 3 trillion naira back into the economy if the economy is to remain healthy. Now, talks that the president may have overruled the Supreme Court's order was not given prominence here, but clearly the House of Reps Special Committee has elected to focus more on how the CBN would adhere to this directive to the letter and even express thoughts that the president may consider reintroducing the old 500 Naira note back into circulation. From the presidential villa, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
Now, before the president's broadcast and reactions from the House of Representatives on that broadcast by the president, the Supreme Court joined Katsina, Lagos, Cross River, Ogun, Ondo, Ekiti and Sokoto states as co-plaintiffs in the suit challenging the Naira redesign policy of the federal government. Similarly, the Apex Court also joined Edo and Bayelsa states in support of the federal government on the implementation of the policy, and then adjourned the case till February the 22nd this year.
It is unusual to see serving state governors in court. However, the presence of some state governors is indicative of the seriousness of the case at hand. The court courtroom of the Supreme Court is filled to its capacity with senior advocates of Nigeria, attorneys general of states who have filed suits for joinder, and other lawyers. Kaduna, Kogi, and Zamfara states had initially filed a motion ex parte praying the apex courts to halt the naira redesign policy of the Central Bank of Nigeria. The court had granted an interim injunction restraining the government, the apex bank, and commercial banks from implementing the February 10 deadline for the use of old notes of the three highest denominations of the naira. At the resumed hearing, 7 states, Lagos, Cross River, Ogun, Ekiti, Ondo, Katsina, and Sokoto states applied to be joined in the suit as plaintiffs, while Edo and Bayelsa states joined the suit in support of the policy. The 7-man panel led by Justice John Okoro reiterated its February 8 order, barring the federal government from enforcing the February 10 deadline. This clarification became necessary after counsel to the initial 3 states, Mr. Abdul Hakim Mustafa, told the courts that the federal government and its agencies have failed to comply with the February 8 order.
We made the point to the courts that the court order of 8th of February restraining the defendant is still subsisting, and the court confirmed now, and the implication of that is that the old notes still remain as legal tender in this country. The policy or directive given by the CBN governor becomes inconsequential.
It's a national problem, and we are working towards solving this problem. There aren't 2 sides. We are affected on both sides. We are trying to solve it.
Some states have ordered banks in their jurisdiction to stop collecting the old naira notes. Some of the governors speak on the court proceedings.
And I want to urge, and of course, all of us governors, we want to urge all Nigerians. Yes, we are all suffering, but let's stay alive. Let's maintain peace, law and order. If we kill ourselves, others will remain there to enjoy your money. It is just a temporary setback for us in this country. We are not condemning this particular policy of President Muhammadu Buhari. It is going to be the way to go, but the implementation, that is what we are questioning.
The court subsequently adjourned the case to February 22nd for hearing of the consolidated case and directed the plaintiffs to amend their originating summons to reflect the name of the 7 fresh suits from the states.
The Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC, says 240 polling units across the country do not have any registered voters, which will impede the conduct of the general elections in those locations. The INEC chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, made this known after a meeting with political parties in Abuja.
The chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, is meeting leaders of political parties ahead of the 2023 general elections. This meeting is to bring the political parties up to speed with INEC's preparations for the 2023 general elections. The INEC chairman also used the opportunity to provide updates on the status of the polling units across the country.
At previous meetings, we also briefed you on our efforts to redistribute voters to the polling units in order to avoid the congestion that made voting cumbersome in many of them nationwide. There are 240 polling units without registered voters. No new registrants choose the polling units, and no voters indicated interest to transfer to them during the last continuous voter registration exercise, mainly for security reasons. This means that no elections will be held in these polling units.
The political parties are satisfied with INEC's preparations. However, they want the electoral body not to consider postponing the elections.
I would want to admonish party leaders that, having observed that the elections are conducted free, fair, and credible, the result should be accepted for the love of our country. Mr. Chairman, under no circumstances should this election be postponed.
Good afternoon. At a separate meeting with a delegation from the United States, the INEC chairman reassures the international community that the votes will count.
We want to assure and reassure you that we're on the same page in our total commitment to a credible, free and fair process, and to assure Nigerians that we'll uphold only that which transpires at the polling units.
Meanwhile, the United States envoy underscores the need for peaceful elections.
Nigeria matters. You matter to the people of Nigeria, to the sub-region, to the continent, and indeed to the international community. And we want to encourage a successful election that is free and fair and peaceful. And I am happy to say that I have great confidence that you will have a successful election.
It's barely 2 weeks to the commencement of the 2023 general elections, and more of these consultative meetings are expected as INEC prepares to ensure that the elections are peaceful and credible.
When News Round returns, police warns against violence as protests hit Lagos. Stay with us.
It begins when news breaks, but there's much more in the details. That's where Special Report comes into the picture, locating source and destination of the news.
Something needs to be done. We don't need to negotiate that. Government should see what we are doing.
Bringing your perspective to the fore.
If those arrested are those protesting against police brutality, I would say that such arrest is unjustified.
Exploring angles that may provide solutions, giving you the opportunity to understand the issues and make decisions. Watch Special Report on Channels Television. Stay connected to the world with Channels TV Podcast and get all the trending stories. Simply log on to channelstv.com, click on podcast, select the program of your choice, and listen. Our podcast is available on Apple, Google, and Spotify. Tap the expertise you trust. Touch the stories that touch you. Anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back. As protests continued in parts of the country over the scarcity of the naira notes, now the Lagos State Police Command is warning that it will not tolerate violent demonstrations. Now, the warning is coming on the heels of violent protests that occurred in some parts of the state in the early hours of Friday, spreading to the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway. Addressing journalists after inspecting some affected areas, the Commissioner of Police of Lagos State explained that the perpetrators of violence would not be allowed to have their way.
It's been barely a week since he resumed in Lagos as Commissioner of Police. And this is the second time he is having to make an on-the-spot assessment at crisis areas. His first was the visit to the Ogijo police station in Ikorodu area of Lagos, a fallout of a clash between policemen and a soldier. And now, following protests that broke out in the Mile 12 area and other parts of Lagos, including Ojota, Ketu and Ikorodu in the early hours of Friday, the police chief is here to see things for himself.
Apparently, an average Nigerian under a democracy has some rights. We respect those rights, but we also appreciate the limits of those rights. If your rights and your concerns are expressed within the ambits of the law, you'll be protected. But what we are witnessing here goes beyond that. It's just an attempt by touts, mostly miscreants, in most of the places, to take advantage of the situation in order to cause, to threaten the security order in Lagos State. We will not tolerate that.
The commissioner is also quick to send a warning to those that may still be contemplating violence in the state.
Anybody, no matter how your status, leanings or whatever, that tries to threaten this order, definitely the police will respond to it forcefully in the interests of the peace-loving people of Lagos State.
Now that relative calm has returned to most parts of the state, residents will be expecting that the police will continue to maintain law and order as the countdown to the general election continues.
As the nation prepares for this year's general elections, the president says that the eyes of the nation and global community are on the Nigeria police and all law enforcement agencies. President Muhammadu Buhari made this known when he commissioned the newly procured police operational assets, vehicles, crowd control and anti-riot equipment at the force headquarters in Abuja.
Barely 11 days to the general elections, the Nigeria police have begun to pile up equipments newly procured to match the demands of the season. President Muhammadu Buhari arrives at the force headquarters in Abuja, but first an inspection of quarter guards. Determined to leave no one in doubt about how the country's law enforcement is bracing up to confront situations either during or after the elections, the police carries out demonstrations of the crowd control rapid deployment barrier, among others.
I renew my assurances to Mr. President and the nation that in line with Your Excellency's charge, the Nigeria Police will be apolitical and impartial and shall deliver on our election security mandates within the context of democratic values and best practices. We have, in furtherance to this, in place adequate machineries that will in most proactive manner identify, isolate and bring to book any political actor that plans to disrupt the political process.
President Buhari equally inspects operational assets, including 45 armored personnel carriers, patrol vehicles, ammunitions, riot control agents, among others, totaling about 127. The police chief had briefed the president and members of the National Council of State on the preparedness of the police to counter any outbreak of law and order during the election. Nevertheless, the president had a word of caution for all security agencies.
In this task, I call on the Inspector General of Police and indeed all law enforcement agencies that will be complementing the police in the election security process to note that the eyes of the nation and the global community will be on you all.
The president announced a significant accomplishment of his plans to reposition the Nigeria police force and expects that the next administration will sustain his initiative and the drive. From Abuja, Gloria Umezuke, Channels Television News.
A news round ends in Turkey, where hopes of finding more survivors in the rubble continue to fade. Now, the combined death toll in both Turkey and neighboring Syria from last week's 7.8 magnitude earthquake has risen above 45,000.
Straddling Europe and Asia across the iconic Bosphorus Strait, residents of Turkey's largest city are a few miles away from the horror their fellow citizens are enduring in the southeast. People here have their own issues to contend with, like a tanking economy and sky-high inflation, issues that have to be pushed aside for now. Istanbul has become a focal point for the hundreds of aid agencies desperate to offer support. Volunteers have left their lives from across the world and are willing to join the search and rescue missions. Those people are not courting public sympathy.
So as to be expected, it's pretty difficult to get a hold of people, but I've hopped into a taxi because I'm told that some international doctors have set up a makeshift HQ so they can get to some of the disaster zones, which is just about an hour away from this bustling city.
Fortunately, I've stumbled upon the local Doctors Worldwide headquarters. The people leading the rescue teams here are not sleeping, but the work doesn't stop.
Actually, the statistics say that there are 23 million people affected by the earthquake in the region. The area is so big, it's almost the size of France. So the numbers tell a lot about how devastating the earthquake is. As we arrived there, there were teams, research and rescue teams working on the ground with some vehicles. And we saw a lot of dead people coming from the collapsed buildings. It was so sad. And there are some happy and some scenes that increase the hope for the future. There were little kids and babies and elderly people coming out alive. And after even 100 hours after the earthquake, and even in longer times, there were people rescued alive from the collapsed buildings. So it's so difficult for the people who are even alive in the region, because they are living outside, they are living in tents, they are living in camp cities established by AFAD, a public body. So bad, actually.
Idil Alabay is a young project assistant turned Mammoth project coordinator, supporting senior staff.
Yeah, we have thousands of volunteer doctors and medical staff here. Also, we have operational teams in there. So it's not enough. It couldn't be enough, but we are trying to reach every out.
So Istanbul may not be the epicenter of the disaster, but it's certainly become the focal point for foreign aid groups, local aid groups, to get together to work to pack essentials that people so desperately need. This room where I'm standing used to actually be a meeting room, but just have a look around me. It's turned into a place where people are sending in medicines, they're sending in clothes, they're sending in food products. We've got lots of young volunteers here working day and night to ensure that the 23 million people who are affected get the help that they so urgently need. Juliana Olayinka, reporting for Channels Television News in Istanbul.
And that ends News Round, a recap of stories that made headlines during the week. I'm Ayo Tunde Balogun. Thank you for watching.